That music means it's a bonus episode, and this week's bonus interview is with producer Brian McLaughlin. Brian was really cool. He took a different path to become a producer in the movie industry, but it was a pretty interesting one. He was in the military, and then he was in the business world, so it's pretty cool the way that fast working in Arizona, he took one acting gig, and then it kind of changed his outlook on everything. He had some great stories growing up with a grandma that was a sculptor, working on some big-time Hollywood movies. So yeah, check him out. And then I have a lot of information about him in the notes. He tells a story about a buddy and has a Twitch channel. I'll put the notes in there as well. But yeah, so this is Brian McLaughlin, producer who let me pick his brain about a lot of things that I did not know about, and I know now. Enjoy. Yeah, thanks for doing this. And I know Jamie reached out to you, and then I was email back and forth with you. So we've been having a lot of fun, like just interviewing so many different people that just are in movie sequels and then are not. So we've had some great conversations with up and coming directors and actors and comedians. So yeah, so we like to know, just like a movie tells a story, where does your story begin?
Okay, I grew up in the LA area, and ironically, my grandmother was in the movie industry, and none of us had the slightest bit of interest in what she did.
Really?
She made props and set dressing for studio films, usually, I guess, any kind of film, including the Alien from the first Alien movie. She didn't invent it. She just created this. She sculpted it from whatever design had already been made, and she made the moray eel from the Deep, if you remember the Deep. And, but more impressively, she did a lot of the set dressing in Billy Jack Goes to Washington, which I found on DVD sometime in the last few years and bought it for probably $1. But I still have not watched it.
That's really neat.
But yeah, I grew up in this area. Go ahead.
No, I was saying that's really neat. So, but you had no interest in what she was doing.
Yeah, none of us ever said, "Oh, let me go to work with you and see what that's like," because that must be cool. No, never occurred to us. And then there I am down the road in the movie industry long after she's been gone. But that's the way it works out sometimes. Oh yeah. So when did you get started in the film industry? Let's see. I started acting in the late 1990s, and then I was living in Tucson at the time, and it was just a hobby, for fun. And I was doing it more and more. There's a pretty active film community in Tucson because they used to make a lot of the Westerns there at old Tucson studios. And my friend, I was working in corporate finance. I had been a business major in school, and this is what I was doing for my career as far as I could tell. And then friends of mine who were filmmakers and worked with me a few times learned of what I did in my day job and asked if I could help them raise funding for their feature films. And I thought, oh, that should be easy. And actually it was for the dollar amount they were talking about. And I ended up putting a lot of research, probably close to a year's worth of research into the industry and what it takes to be a producer, and did a business plan and a presentation for investors, and then kind of realized that those filmmakers couldn't do anything with what I had put together. So it would have to be me. And I also learned that nobody really wants to meet in the off work hours to be talked into giving up their money. And so I ended up deciding to quit my job. As much as I liked it, it was a fun career for me, and go into something even more fun that has been incredibly satisfying and enjoyable. And that was in 2005, and I've been a full-time film producer ever since. With doing sometimes, I had teaching jobs and other things in between, but all of those were related to filmmaking.
Where have you taught at?
The first was at the Art Institute of Tucson. The director of my first two feature films was teaching there. In fact, he was, if I remember right, he was the head of the film department, and they needed someone to teach business classes, and he knew I had an MBA and came from the business world, and asked if I'd be interested in teaching. And I thought, no, but you're a friend and it's a little income, so why not?
Yeah.
And I did that for a year or two, and then I went off and I was General Petraeus' media production advisor on his advisory team in Afghanistan for 6 months, and that was a really fun and interesting job.
Wow, I bet.
And then I went to teach. Yeah, it's. And then I went from there to teach at Notre Dame in their film department, which was my alma mater.
Oh, nice. Go Irish.
Yeah, it was really cool to be on the other side of, I guess the other side of the classroom. There wasn't really a desk, I don't think. But it was so much fun, and I still stay involved with a lot of my students, or a lot of students that may not have been my students, but have gone through the program, and I've tried to continue to be a mentor to many of them. And then I moved to LA after that job, and decided to pursue a career in the bigger Hollywood, and eventually started teaching at the Los Angeles Film School, and taught business classes there because they have a business program. Yeah, so that's all the teaching I've done.
So what do you enjoy more? Like, what got you hooked in this industry? Was it being in front of the camera, or doing the behind the scenes, like producing stuff?
Back when I was acting, because I don't do it anymore, which I guess answers the question. But when I was doing both, people asked me the question, and I would always say acting was what I preferred more, because when it happens, it's just magical to become a character and to, forget that there's crew and everything around, and to become somebody else. But the producing allows me to mix both sides of my personality, the creative and the business. And I really love producing. I love starting coming up with the idea and following that through all the way to getting something on screen and getting money, ideally, back to investors and everyone else involved. It's just nice to have that responsibility and control, I guess. Not that I'm a control freak, but I mean, to have some control of your destiny. And but as actors, don't generally brag about having. Not that I'm bragging, but it is cool to say, "Oh man, this would be a great movie," and say, "Okay, well, let's get it written," and everything else that comes with it.
Yeah, I've talked to some actors that for when they see that first cut of the movie, and they're like, "Oh, they took that scene, like that take, instead of that,
right.
Like that maybe they get liked another way they presented it." But so what would you say the process is? Like, how long is that cycle from when you say, "Oh, this is a really great idea, let's write it, like how long does it typically take to? I know it changes per film, but to get that funded to get it going.
Yeah. In the first couple of films I did, and I wasn't involved in the development part, I was just brought on to produce. But so I was really on the tail end from raising the money. In those cases, it went very quickly because there were smaller budget things, and then through post production and selling them to distributors. And all four of those did get sold to distributors. So I'm happy about that. One of them is currently on Amazon Prime still. But the films that I've started from the very kernel of an idea, the oldest one I have, we started in about probably 2009 or 10, and it hasn't been made yet. And it's still one that will get made, but we haven't been able to focus on that one lately. It's a little bit less of high concept, so it's going to be harder to get the money together for that one. So we're focusing on the more high concept ones, the ones that are more marketable. And the one that will probably get made first, it's the only one that we didn't develop come up with the idea ourselves. It was a screenplay sent to my producing partner, Penelope Korf, who loved it and wrote to me and said, "We got to produce this." And I had read it twice before and given notes back to the screenwriter, who's a friend. He wrote the first two films I produced. And so I was happy to help him with notes, but he didn't send it to me with the in the context of, "Hey, can you want to produce this?" And Penelope was reading it also for notes, but loved it and said, "Well, let's make this." And so that was when we got that one. It was probably only like 2 years ago, when we've gone through another 10 rewrites with the writer, and we just recently locked the script. And we think it'll be fairly quick within the next year, or maybe 6 months, to raise that funding. We have someone who's interested in funding, is why I can be optimistic like that. And that's a $2 million film. And the one that is also in parallel being developed, the idea came in about 2000 and probably 12, and it's a military film. Let's see, that's off. It was probably more like 2014, because I had met the soldier that it's about in 2011 when I was working in Afghanistan. He and I worked together.
Okay.
And so I didn't even think at the time about making a film, but then I had a meeting with Peter Berg, who had recently done Lone Survivor, and I thought, I wonder if I have anything I can pitch to him, and came up with this idea. And we haven't pitched it to him because we're probably going down another path, but so that we started writing in about 2014 or 15, and it started with interviewing the soldier for 3 days on camera, and sending the tapes then or they weren't really tapes, they were digital files, to the writer who wrote, almost like taking dictation, because the story was so complete, and not to take away from the writer, because he really crafted a beautiful screenplay. And then Penelope and I worked with him for another, I'm not following the math right, but until late 2000 or early 2018, we worked with him on refining the script. And now we have a big production company that has a strong interest in the film, and it'll depend on us attaching the right actors. But they've said that they have, they're really interested in both funding and distributing it globally. Wow. So that's exciting. So that was maybe 2014, 2015 to, if we shoot it next year, that ends up being 4 or 5 or 6 years in the full cycle. Well, not the full cycle, because then there's the release.
Yeah.
So, and that's, I think, pretty typical for films. Even people who are established big producers with a lot of hits under their belt, it still takes several years for most projects to go from idea to the screen.
Yeah, and I'm reading this right now. I don't know, a lot of times IMDb isn't right, but you were in the military?
Yes.
Oh, great. Well, thank you.
I was Yeah, you're welcome. It was my pleasure, in fact. I was in ROTC in college, and went from there into the Army for 4 years active, and then I stayed in the reserves for another 16. I had always thought I'll just stay in as long as it's fun, and it continued to be fun.
Yeah.
But my last year was the first 12 months basically following 9/11. So I got called up for a year after 9/11, and then that was the end of my career. Not in a bad way. I don't mean it to sound like it. That was the end of my career, because I screwed that up. No, it was just timing wise. The end. No,
the reason I was while I was reading that, and then you went into that story, I was thinking, I was like, oh man, that'd be like right up his alley, and that lines up perfect. Yeah,
and it's maybe coincidentally, because none of our other films are military based.
Yeah.
But and Penelope is also a veteran. She's a former signal officer. Yeah, that's the whole word. I thought there was something that comes after that, but so we both are, and our go-to writer is a Navy veteran who later went into the Army National Guard. So there's a lot of that going around. We're both part of, I guess maybe all three of us are part of a group called Veterans in Media and Entertainment, and that's how I met Penelope. And Ken, the writer, Ken Henderson, I've known him, of course, since that first film I produced. And there are a lot of great, talented and skilled, talented actors, skilled crew people in that organization, and I'm really happy to be part of it. It does a lot of good for veterans and also for filmmakers who looking for hardworking, smart people, and also talented actors, because I'd say about half the organization is actors, and then the rest is everything else.
Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Here's a question, because you're the first person I've chatted with that's a producer, and you don't have to give away any secrets, but So who backs a film? So you mentioned the movie that it's going to be a $2 million budget. Is it like individual people like buying stake in like a percentage of like a company, and then they get that? And like, how does that work?
It can happen in just a myriad of what combinations. The simplest would be you find one person who loves it and has plenty of money to put into it. But that's probably less common. But we are pursuing every possible source of funding, which is writing to potential private equity investors or venture capitalists, film funds. There's a film fund possibly is the one that I mentioned on the $2 million one. Okay. And as I said, there's the one production company that wants to fund the military one. But it could be a combination of all this. Often you go out and get, once you have a cast attached, you can generally get pre-sales on foreign territory, so international distributors really, or estimates of what the international sales would be. And both of those elements can be borrowed against from banks that lend to filmmakers.
Oh wow!
And then maybe you can get a distributor on the front end, and then if that's the case, you might be able to get loan against that. Tax credits are another way people get funding. If you know where you're going to shoot and you can apply for and get a guarantee of a tax credit, then you can go to a lender and they'll lend against whatever value that happens to be. So all those then add up to hopefully to the total budget. And if you're a little shy, then there are lenders who provide gap financing to fill in the difference. And each one has a different cost to it. So if you borrow against certain collateral in effect, then you pay interest, but you don't have to share in revenue with the lender. If you get private equity or any other kind of funding like that, then generally you pay them back first, plus some sort of additional percentage, and then you start splitting the money 50-50, anything beyond that. And this is after the theaters and distributors and maybe a few other people have taken their share out. So it's a complicated formula that I think you have to really have a good understanding of if you want to end up with any of the money.
Yeah, and you know what? It's good that you have that background. I don't know if every producer out there has a corporate finance and business background like you do, but I think that does help because then you don't have to hire somebody that knows all that stuff. Right.
And then you still want to hire some people who are maybe smarter than you or than me, let's say, as an example. But because I may have some sensibility about it, but I was not. When I was in corporate finance, the corporation was not a film company, so so there's some nuances that I may not understand, but it does certainly give me a leg up, and I'm learning constantly more stuff. I go to conferences and workshops and just talking with people and listening to your podcast and stuff like that are ways that all of us can continue to learn more and get smarter. And it also changes from time to time because I talked about getting pre-sales and international sales estimates. And a lot of people will tell you how those are going away because now the streamers send out the content globally. Yeah. And so, but there's still the theatrical, and they don't send it out globally to theaters, and so there is still a market there. It's just a changed market.
Yeah. So let's circle back to your acting. Is there a favorite role that you got to play?
Well, I'll mention two. One of them was a favorite because it was my absolute first time on camera for anything, counting short films, student films, anything, and it was a William Shatner directed movie.
What was it called?
He cast me in it. It was called Groom Lake, and then later changed to The Visitor. So I don't know which is the easier way to find it, but it was IMDb. About an alien.
Yeah, it's on IMDb as Groom Lake, but look at that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And William Shatner, came in and had me read for him, and I was just thrilled. And he cast me as a doctor, but the Screen Actors Guild said to him, and rightfully so, this guy has never done anything. You cannot cast him in this film. So he asked me to be an extra instead, and I said, okay, I will definitely rather spend 4 days working on a movie with William Shatner than going to work.
Yeah.
And so that was a great experience. He's a wonderful guy, and he put me in a lot more of the movie as an extra than he would have as the doctor. So I was really happy. And then, the most fun role was in a Tucson independent feature film called The Decoy. And I was one of the bad guys. It was a Western, and I just figured, okay, I'm one of the guys who gets shot, is what I figured. I did have lines, but it was, basically one of the thugs, and knew it wasn't a major role. And the day of the shoot, the director said to me, a guy named Justin Kreinbrink, really experienced guy, said to me, "You're going to play the hayseed, so you're the dumb one." And I took it and ran with it, and had so much fun with it. And he even gave me more lines. I think actually put me in another scene because he liked what I was doing so much. And then at the premiere in Tucson, one of the audience members went up to the executive producer afterwards and said to him, "It was so good to see that you actually cast a mentally disabled person in that role."
Wow. So you were very believable. That's good.
Yeah, it was quite the compliment, even if it was a little backhanded.
Yeah. That's great. That's so cool. Is there any?
Yeah.
So with the producing end of it, I know you have a couple that are in the pipeline that you want to get produced. Is there any other type of film or genre that you've always wanted to be able to do that full cycle, like whether it be horror, a thriller, or like another Western like that?
The films that we're doing, we have 8 on our upcoming slate. They're just a mix of all kinds of stuff. Military, as I mentioned, crime, sci-fi, drama. There's probably more. And so the genre doesn't matter to us. We just want to find characters we love and stories that really grab us. But I would say that one genre that I would love to do that I haven't done yet, don't have any of these really in development, is a comedy. Both Penelope and I have fairly active senses of humor, and we put a lot of comedy in the scripts that we write. I mean, she's written one, I've written 2, and there is a lot of comedy from specific characters just in their dialogue style, but we haven't developed just a full out comedy, and I'm sure we'll get around to that because I certainly have always enjoyed. I enjoy all kinds of movies, but comedies are the ones I laugh at the most.
Yeah, I think comedy is like one of those genres. I would say kind of like horror. It could be like super low budget and still be really good. It just depends on how it's written. So
yeah, right, and really challenging. I mean, both of those genres have rules that are, that the audience kind of brings into these expectations of the structure of the film, of the story and everything. And to nail it is challenging. And it's a challenge that I think we would like to take on.
No, that's great. So you sound like you love what you do. Obviously, you left your corporate finance job and doing that and the acting end of it to be, full-time producing. So what is your favorite part of what you do now?
Well, I will say, just to reinforce what you said about how much I love it, I mean, there are times that are really financially tough because, basically we don't get paid until a project gets funded.
Yeah.
Not that we can't have day jobs and, like the teaching or do producing work for other people, which I also do. Parts of the production, but there hasn't been a day, even in my worst days of terror financially, that I thought I should go back. I should quit this and go back to the corporate world. I could go to a corporate job in like a studio or a network, and that would be fine. But I love producing, and I would never leave the industry. I can't imagine. But the thing that keeps me here, the thing that I love is just, I've always loved movies and I've loved TV, but movies even more. And just to be part of that and to be able to create something, to bring a story to life, to bring characters to life is something that I never even imagined in my old life. But now that I am part of that. It's like I couldn't leave it. It's to bring us just to be, even when I have to read a script over and over again and give notes, it's like I love it though. I'm in a new world. I'm with people that we've helped create or we've created ourselves, and it's just I've already said magical about acting, so I'm looking for a different word. Fantastical. How about that?
That's a good word. So what do you think? What do you think right now? If your grandma could see what you're doing, what do you think she would say after that? You had no interest when you were younger.
I don't. She got into it as an artist. She was a sculptor mainly, and that was a way to get paid for sculpting. And my guess is that she loved the art part of it more than the job part of it. I don't know that because we never talked about it, but it's her house, her garage were filled with sculptures that had nothing to do with the film world. But I think that she would be tickled. I think that she would be surprised because the orientation of my family had been always in corporate kind of work, and surprised, but probably pleasantly surprised, and kind of, but she would have to admit that it really had nothing to do with following in her footsteps unless she took some huge strides that covered decades for me to get there.
Yeah. So what was the movie that you mentioned before that's on Amazon Prime that you produced?
It's called Good Boy. It's a psychological suspense, and you have to be careful because there are, I'd say, at least 4 good boys. But this one is the one directed by Roddy. He directed the first 2 films I made. Good Boy was the second of the 2. Red 71 was the other.
Okay.
So Red 71 and
2009 it came out. So I know, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hopefully the other Good Boys didn't come out in that same year to confuse people, but I'll put the link in the notes so people can check it out.
Great. Thank you.
And you had a role in that?
I was the producer on that.
Oh, okay. They actually have you in the cast too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. I did play a role in that, and recently, for whatever reason, I put it on Facebook, and people, and I have this big '70s porn mustache in it, and I play a cop, and so so it's hard to tell what kind of movie it is, I guess, when you look at that picture. But it was fun to revisit that recently, and have a lot of people who never knew I acted see that. But yeah, it was a fun role. Patrick's a good director, and he's a noir kind of guy, and he had just started. I wish I could remember. Maybe I'll tell you. I'll send you an email about a link to his.
Yeah.
He has a TV. Basically, he broadcasts live. And when I say live, obviously they're not live because these things have been filmed, but he broadcasts the films that he's made at specific, but he doesn't stream them. He broadcasts them, so you can only watch them when he's broadcasting them, which I think he does on Fridays and Saturday evenings. So I'll send you the link to that too,
Yeah.
and he can get some traffic to his shows.
Definitely.
Kind of old school that way.
No, that is pretty cool. So just one more question. This has been great because
Sure.
My goal with this is obviously to talk to as many people as we can and chat about. And then me and Jamie, we talk about movies and watch them and break them down. But really just having the chance to. I'm doing this in a almost selfish way because I love talking to people anyway. But no, just seeing all the different aspects of the movie industry, like talking to a stunt man that I'm going to talk to in a few weeks, and just being able to know like what goes into all of that, because there's so many pieces that goes into Nicolas Cage on camera. So there's all these other pieces that go together.
Good example.
Yeah, that guy's. I feel like every time I go on YouTube, and because I watch a lot of movie trailers, every time I go on there, it seems like he has a new movie trailer coming out.
He works a lot, from what I hear. Just seeing it like you, seeing it from the outside, because I've never worked with him, but I hear that he works a lot. I've never gone and looked it up, but yeah, and there is a lot that goes into it. People always ask what a producer does. Even people in the industry will ask that, and because it's kind of nebulous. There are so many different kinds of producers, particularly if you include TV, because writers get promoted into producing titles, and those titles mean different things when you come over to film. So an executive producer in TV is really the top writer, even though they have more responsibility than that. And in the film world, it's generally the person who provided the funding or some other kind of significant resource to get the film done. But just the person with the title producer in film is the one who basically is either, you can describe him as a program or her as a program manager or as a CEO of a company or a program that happens to be a film. So from coming up with the idea, founding the company, basically getting the funding, honing the content, whether it was someone else had written it or you get it written yourselves, and then making all the other pieces come together, the director, the cast, all the crew, the locations and everything. And then distribution. And at the tail end, we still have the responsibility to making sure the revenue over years after the thing was released get distributed to the people who contractually are obligated to get that, which includes all the actors and much of the crew and all the investors. So it's definitely a cradle to grave job, and I really thrive on all of that and love doing it. It's not for everyone, but there's so many things to do in the industry as you're exploring that you can have a different job every week for a few years and before you covered everything. So it's pretty cool.
No, it is. And you have to be a different type of person to do what you're doing, because not a lot of people, A, want to work that hard, and B, it seems like you'd have to be available 24/7. And like you said, you're doing so many different things. You're wearing so many different hats, the locations, honing the script, the idea, that's a lot. And that's a lot to put on one person's shoulders. So you have to be a different kind of person to do that.
Yeah. And then there's the soft skills stuff, the interpersonal stuff that, you have you mentioned honing the script. Writers love what they've written, and they don't necessarily think that what Penelope and I have to say is going to improve it. But Ken is great with that and loves the notes that we've given him and sees the value in many of them. I was going to say most, but I don't want to exaggerate.
Yeah.
And well, one thing that will tell you how people look at filmmaking in general is that in pretty much every other job in the economy, when someone wins the lottery, the first thing they do is quit their job. If you're in the film industry and you win the lottery, you're like, we can work for the rest of our lives now. We have the money to fund our jobs for the rest of our lives. We'll never have to stop working, because that's how much we love doing it.
That's great.
It's a little crazy.
So when you go into like pitching for like a movie and you go in, you sit down with, potential investors or a studio, is it just presenting the script, or are you able to tell them, like, I see, just throwing out a name, but like, I see Tom Cruise in this role, this person in that role? Is it like you're kind of like giving them what it could be, or do you guys actually produce like a mock trailer?
People do it different ways, and some people see a lot of value in producing a trailer or a scene or something like that to show. And I personally disagree with that, at least for me, because then you have now two things you have to raise money for: the big film, the full film, and raise money just to pay for that trailer.
Oh yeah.
And the trailer may be shot by a different director, a different cinematographer, different actors than you eventually plan to have. And so it may not even be representative of what you're going to make. Plus, it may differ once the investor or whoever it is sees the trailer. It may differ from what they had in their head, and they might have loved what they had in their head before they looked at your trailer. So it may actually backfire, or they may not have anything in their head, and the trailer really helps them, and they fall in love with it. So it works differently. It does work for a lot of people, but it's not it's not for me how I like to pitch. I go in with a synopsis, which is a paragraph or so long after a log line, which is one sentence, and I talk about the strengths of this project. Why do I love it? And then I talk about who we are, Penelope and I, and Ken, if Ken's a writer, or another writer we have on another project, Ginia Desmond. So I talk about the strengths of the writer. And then the subject matter, of course, also the subject matter of the story, particularly if it's a true story like the military one, and why that particular project is something that I'm excited about, or we're excited about getting made, and why. And I try to get the other person equally excited. And it's not like a sales job to me. It's like, if you aren't excited about it, then let's not make a movie together.
Yeah.
Maybe you're excited about another one of our projects, but I want the financier to be just as excited about it and love it just as much as we do, because that's just all this positive energy that helps the thing succeed. And so the script comes later. Once they're excited about it, then they may say, let me read the script. Not all, like a private equity investor may not be that interested in the script. But studios and companies that finance films generally will be. Or they might just, and yes, to get back to your question about the actors, yeah, in all those cases, we do say, here's who we are considering for the lead role or the supporting roles, because in one case I started to say the wife as if that's always the supporting role, but one case the two lead roles are women, they're sisters, and so we say, here's who we envision in those, and sometimes we would already have the actors attached, or the directors and actors, and so that's not only just envisioning it; it's also maybe the case.
That's interesting. Yeah. I always wanted to know like how that whole process went when people pitched, and no, that's good. So since you're in this and you haven't worked on, at least I don't see it, IMDb is not always 100%, but like, so we talk about movie sequels, and then there's like good sequels, obviously, ones that continue the story. Then there's some sequels that have nothing to do with like the original movies. Is there any sequels like that you remember over the years that like you watched that you really enjoyed?
Well, what comes to mind for me always is the original. Well, not just the original, but the original and the reboot of the Planet of the Apes franchise.
Yeah,
I grew up on those movies, watched them many times, and watched all of them. And then now that the new ones are out, go and make sure I see those opening weekend. I love monkeys. I love talking monkeys. I don't necessarily love monkeys who kill people, but sometimes that's part of the package. So yeah, I really do see most movies that come out, and but when it comes to sequels, those have been some of those really were that was my favorite franchise, my favorite collection of sequels. So I can watch those over and over again.
I agree with you. I'd loved when they would have like those. I think they would just call it the Monkey Marathon. They would have it on, I think, AMC or one of those, and they play them all back to back for hours upon hours. And that's one of the movies I want to try to like interview, like one of the actors. Obviously, pretty old now because the movies are older, but those are movies too that just like raise the bar, like how like just I don't know how like crazy they get. Like when it's set. I forgot if it's Beneath or Escape, when it's like set in like present day, and like I forgot which one that is.
That was everything after the first two. So Beneath was the second one, and then Escape they left and they went back in time to present day, and then there was Conquest, I think, and then Battle. Which I think is odd that the Conquest came before the Battle, but the Conquest was over us, and then Battle was amongst the apes. So it does make sense.
How old were you when the first one came out? You're probably really young, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was a kid. I don't remember what year that was, but I did see it in theaters, so that is aging me. We was even as young kid. Every weekend in the summer we would be dropped off for a couple hours at the movie theater, as my parents enjoyed some peace and quiet in whatever the way they chose to.
These movies did great because they did. Planet of the Apes came out in 68, and then 70, 71, 72, and 73. So they just like kept pumping them out, and they swapped out Charlton. They swap out Charlton Heston kind of for the other guy for the name of the second one, but it was like a really quick like. But no, those movies are great. No, that's great. But I also love. Speaking of sequels, I also love the whole Marvel world. Yeah, and I like the DC movies too. But Marvel is, of course,
Well, Marvel. I'm Team Marvel, even though DC is like a secret, a secret. What's the term I'm looking for? But anyway, a guilty pleasure. That's what I'm.
Yeah.
And but Captain America, always through childhood till today, is still my favorite superhero. And I would love to get Chris Evans in my military film. He is one of the people we're going to reach out to, because I think, yes, have Captain America play a soldier. Why not?
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I would have loved, and I wish they had done it, but they were more realistic than I was, to watch in the theaters every Marvel movie start up, Iron Man through Endgame just in one sitting. Would have been a little bit of slice of heaven for me.
Yeah.
I did do that before. I forget which it might have been Civil War, where they had that Marvel marathon. And I think it was 8 films that they did and it was, it was in the starting first thing in the morning. And then the last film of the day was whichever one that was that they were releasing. And it was, everybody was stinky by the end and just completely geeking out.
Yeah. I chatted with a guy, his name's Cotter Smith. He played the president in X-Men 2. And,
okay.
And you got to think, that movie came out in 2002, and those effects, because I watched it before I talked to him, and those are some really good effects. And that's that's like early, like really good CGI. So those were good too. Those X-Men films, the first trilogy was pretty great.
Yeah. Yeah. The one film, or the one couple films, which obviously doesn't make sense, but anyway, were the first 2 Hulk films, where they clearly suffered from the CGI not being ready.
Yeah.
It wasn't to the level it should have been, but it was, I still had fun watching them. So.
Oh yeah. No, there's some movies that are just guilty pleasures, like you mentioned, that aren't even that good. Like, one of my favorite movies is Howard the Duck. So and that's guilty pleasure type movie. But Brian, thanks so much.
I think they're making either a sequel or a reboot, of that. So
I saw that.
Yeah,
I hope they make it. Because I know the movie is definitely different than the comic. I never read the comic of Howard the Duck, but love the movie, just the way he was, and just it's such a ridiculous concept.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, man. Well, have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Doug. You too. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, so that was Brian. Make sure in the episode notes of all the information, his IMDb, everything that you can do to make sure you follow him and support him. And support us. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Sequels Only. Review, rate, and share our podcast. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your mom. And don't forget, the next interview this Thursday is an epic one. R.A. Mihailoff. He played Leatherface in Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Talk about an epic guy. His stories are amazing. He was a license to drive. He was a tow truck driver. And God, this guy was a professional wrestler. And he does a lot of his impressions that he did in movies and lines. So, he was a lot of fun. So subscribe so you don't miss out. Good night.